All right, morning, everybody. My name is Michael Becker, as you all know, and this is the Tinderbox session for my patrons and friends. So as you know, I do a lot of work in the Tinderbox community, and I have a patron channel where people are actually contributing real hard cash to support my addiction to Tinderbox. So I greatly appreciate that. And so about once a month, I give a private kind of session and tutorial for my patrons and friends, and this is the one for April 2022. So thank you very much, everyone, for showing up. And we are recording this, and I will be sharing it with the other patrons that couldn't make it to today's session, and we very well may carve up snippets of this and share it with the broader Tinderbox community at some point. So with that in mind, just want to make sure, because the patron channel is a private channel, so I just want to get verification from all of you that it's okay that we do kind of share some of this content publicly, going forward. All good? Okay, thank you for that. All right, so I've been diligently working, as you know, for months now, trying to figure out the best way to produce content to manage knowledge and really use Tinderbox as a personal knowledge management tool. And I've been refining this process in what I call the 5 C's of personal knowledge management, something that, pretty much everyone on this call has been guiding and helping me through along the way. I've spent a ton of time with Lou working through, elements of the study, and Tom, and most certainly Mark Anderson. Nothing happens in the Tinderbox world without Mark Anderson. And actually, I just remember back almost 2 years ago now, Bruce and Tom and I were just sitting down. It's like, maybe we should once and for all figure out this Tinderbox thing and see if we can make this really work for us. And I think we've actually achieved that. So what I'm going to do today is show you a file that I've been working on. And I'm still working on the README. And one of the things I'd really appreciate as I go through this process is that I really want to be able to, probably sometime in the July timeframe, convert this actually into a full-fledged, Tinderbox 101 course. So, it's hard to kind of type and write at the same time and teach and talk at the same time. So if one of you can be capturing notes as we go through this process and kind of capture some of those anchor concepts of, this is what I understood, this is what I don't understand. Well, again, my objective would be sometime around the July-August timeframe, start taking the material that I'm showing you today and turn that into a 6-week course with all of the supporting materials and programs around that, so that people can subscribe to that course and then really dig in and learn Tinderbox. So anyone want to volunteer to help take notes as we go? Perfect. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it. So chime in at any time, and let me kind of show you what what I've got here. So for those that are possibly listening in the recorder in the future, you start, when you first open up Tinderbox, you start with a blank document like this, and you can simply start taking notes. Note 1, note 2, note 3, etc. And one of the things that I've learned along the way is, Tinderbox has this concept called prototypes and attributes and all of that. And I don't, for those of you that all know that, I don't necessarily want to dig into that in too much great detail because you already know it. But what you're seeing here in this file is I've pre-collected a handful of notes. I've also pre-established and created a number of prototypes. And each of these prototypes have a variety of attributes associated with them. So the overall objective of this particular Tinderbox project is to help one start codifying their knowledge and thoughts. And if you go back to, or if we go to one of my articles, let me pull up that web page as I think about it. Really, the impetus behind all of this is this, what I'm calling the 5 C's of knowledge management process. It's very similar to what, what's the name of that guy again? Tiago
Forte.
Yeah, Tiago Forte. So Tiago Forte actually has a program he calls Building a Second Brain. And it's very, very similar to the process that I'm proposing here, and the way you go about managing. He's got his 5 steps as well, or he's got 4 steps. I've got 5. I've added the collaboration piece to the process, but it's all very similar. And the idea is you collect some thoughts and ideas, you curate those ideas through tagging and linking and populating values in your Tinderbox attributes. When you're going through that process, invariably you will create new ideas. You'll create, new concepts will come to mind, which will then lead to more collection and curation. Another key step of curation is citation management. Invariably, like what we're doing today, you'll collaborate with your colleagues and friends in the industry, or you may do what Corey Doctor refers to as adversarial interoperability, where you don't actually necessarily collaborate with people, you just do it, and and let the community survive for that. And then when you're ready, you'll publish your content. And what's really, and so Tiago calls it, express yourself, express your content. I'm referring to it as contribution because you're giving value back for your effort out to the world. And so this is really the process. And this file that we're going to go through in the next, say, 50 minutes or so, it really represents every single one of those steps. Where you can collect information, you can curate that information, you can collaborate, you can, like we're doing today, you can create new concepts, and then you can ultimately contribute it. So what are the core steps of this? So if you're collecting, the collection process really just starts with notes. So we're going to add a new note, and I'm going to go ahead and here, and I'll add a new note. And you'll see I've now started to collect some notes. And let's say I'm going to add some text to that. I've got a text expander installed, so I'm just going to add some lorem ipsum text there. And I've now starting to collect some thoughts and ideas. The other way to go about collecting notes would say, let's say I really like this article from this guy named Michael Becker, who's talking about knowledge management. I can just drag that note over into my Tinderbox file, and Tinderbox will dutifully grab the title from the HTML file, populate the URL, give me that. I can delete this and say, this is an article about the 5 C's of knowledge. Okay, and what we also learned here was, and I talked about this other, piece of insight called the second brain. So let's pull that in. So we also now have, Tiago's second brain, another popular approach to knowledge. All right, so you see we've basically been collecting some notes, and so that's a really simplistic example of the collection stage. And you'll note here that I've collected some other notes there as well. So generally I'm assuming we're all okay with that step, correct? All good? Okay, now when you've done that, now one of the key things that you'll see here when I drag these notes from the internet, and as I was collecting them, Tinderbox grabbed the one of the attributes that was in that file, which was called URL. But you'll notice that I also have this my prototype P note established to this. So you might be asking yourself, well, wait a minute, P note prototype has all of these other attributes, but this prototype that we've just dragged in isn't displaying those attributes. Well, the reason why that is Tinderbox doesn't inherit the prototype of the notes that you're dragging in. And another point too is the reason why these notes we're getting that prototype. So let me show you, for example, if I just drag randomly into the file, you'll notice that this note is getting assigned the URL, but it has no prototype. So the reason why these notes got the prototype P note when I dragged them in is because I had an on add function right here that's saying add that prototype when I'm dragging those files into the note. Now, if you want to reset your, in this collection phase, you're going to do a lot of this, and you'll see that sometimes, well, really, I want to show all of the attributes that I have related to my program. There's two ways to go about doing that. So on this note, you can go ahead and click on the display attributes section and hit reset, and that will reset the displayed attributes for your note. So you will show you all and re-inherit all of the displayed attributes for this particular note from your P note prototype. The other way to do that, which I find really convenient, is if you hit Command 1 and open up your document inspector, and you hit the number, you go to the properties inspector, and you can go to the quick stamp. So on the quick stamp, what you can now do is say displayed attributes, right? And then if you click this button right here, you'll see right here, it says assign to this note. So what this is telling you is this particular note is assigning its displayed attributes to itself. It's not inheriting it from anywhere else. So it has a local value, in other words. So if I click this inherited button here, you'll see it just changed. It's saying it's inherited now from the P note. And so you'll see that the displayed attributes actually change. So I find the quick stamp function is kind of hidden within Tinderbox, but it's incredibly valuable because you can use it, for instance, if you want to then go and re-inherit multiple notes at once, you can select them all with the command key, hit the displayed attributes, and it will reset all of those selected notes by whatever values you're using for this quick stamp. So that's a really, really nice little tip that I'm not sure a lot of people are aware of. So what you've seen now is what we've done is we've pulled in a couple of these notes and we have added some information to them. So now a couple of other things you might see that what's going on in my file is I tend to add, and when I dragged in these notes, it didn't add their prefixes in. So if I go ahead and say note prefix and just type those in. So you'll notice when I do a lot of my trainings, you'll see that I've been adding prefixes in front of notes like note or figure or some other element. The reason why I do that is that allows me to distinguish different note names. So let's say I had a note called on privacy was my note, but let's say I also had another item called figure on privacy, right? So let's presume, and in this particular file, I'm not going to get into images because that's a whole other discussion on managing images in Tinderbox, but let's just assume this was an image file that I had in my file. So now I have a distinction between on privacy and a figure. The reason why I like to have this, this prefixing is for a variety of reasons, and I'll show you another one, but the primary reason is for linking. So for example, if I start typing the word on privacy, right, I'm able to now distinguish, okay, I want to link to the figure on privacy versus the note on privacy. And so using this prefix methodology for me, it allows me to, when I'm doing any kind of linking or searching or visual navigation in that regard, I can distinguish between a note and one note and another note. So with that in mind, then, when you're doing that kind of linking, let me show you another example of that. So let's say we're going to link to the on privacy figure item, right? Well, when you're doing this kind of work, you don't really want the prefix showing up in your writing. So the prefix is there functionally for you to be able to distinguish one note from another, but you don't really want that prefix showing up in your writing. So what you'll see here is I've created a user-generated attribute called short title. And so you'll notice what the short title user-generated attribute is doing is it's basically, Tinderbox is basically parsing out the prefix and then giving me a short title that I can then pull and leverage into my writing. And so I'll show you how that works is I've created down in my libraries file, which is in hints, a function called short title. And so what this function called short title is essentially doing is it's saying, take the name of the note, skip to the first hyphen space, and then capture the rest of the information and stick it into the value called short title. And so that's how that's working. So if you look at any of my, the action code or the rules for my notes, you'll see every one of my notes all has the function, is calling the function short title. And so what that's doing is that's parsing out the prefix from every note, giving me a short title, and then I'll be able to functionally use that in my text, which I'll be able to demonstrate to you in a minute. Okay, so let's pause right there. Does that make sense? The use of a prefix, the use of a short title, and the action code that I'm using to be able to parse that out. Any questions there?
It makes sense, Michael. I'm guessing I like maybe others, but I have to go back and go over the actual.
Yeah, you'll be able to go, and we are recording this, so you'll be able to go through that. But I'm just kind of parsing these pieces together. Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
So you included that down in hints. I've never used the hints.
Got it. Okay.
What is the function there?
Okay, so this is really cool. So I at first, no disrespect to Mark Bernstein, but I have no idea why he called it hints. One day I'll want to figure it out. For me, it's more like libraries, functions. So in Tinderbox 8 something 9, I can't remember when it was introduced. Mark introduced this, I think it was 9. he introduced a concept called the hints folder. And if you go up to Tinderbox file hints, that will add this hints capability into your Tinderbox file. And in this Tinderbox file, what you'll see is it has what's called the stop list, preview. This is for some styling and templating, highlighters. So you may have heard that Tinderbox has a functionality now to be able to automatically highlight content in your file. So that's where you'd manage that. Tinderbox also has some natural language processing to automatically tag your content for you based on what's in the text or the name. That's where you'd manage it here in taggers. And then Tinderbox now has where instead of managing your stamps, where you typically manage it here, Tinderbox has now moved your ability to manage your stamps either in the inspector or now here. So when you have really long pieces of stamp code, you can actually write your stamp code now in stamps, and then that will show up here in your stamps paths. So if I go here, well, I'll watch this. If I say new stamp,
sorry,
and hit enter, and then if I go up here, we'll let it refresh. Hang on, where is it? Okay, it will refresh in just a minute. This new stamp is going to add to the stamp window. And if I go here, you'll see now I've got a new stamp, right? So it's basically allowing you to manage your stamps actually in notes. And it makes it's just a lot easier, and it gives you a lot more room to write and edit and configure that. Similarly, stamps, if you recall, are one-off actions. You apply a stamp, it runs. Functions are longer ways, I shouldn't say longer. They're places for you to write your action code and then to trigger a variety of capabilities and functions. So, and I'm going to go into this in just a minute, but you'll see here, I've got this function saying create with prefix input. So what this is doing is I'm telling Tinderbox when I place this term, and I'll show you in just a second, into the rule or edict, or even a stamp, if you will, anywhere where you can trigger action code in an agent query action, or excuse me, an agent action, anywhere you can trigger action code in Tinderbox, you can put the name of a function and Tinderbox will dutifully execute.
I don't know about others. Michael has temporarily frozen for me.
No, I'm here now. Are you back? Okay. So Tinderbox will dutifully execute the action code that you have in that function. And when Mark first released it, I'm like, because I was so comfortable the way I used to do it. But within a couple of weeks, I realized I do almost everything now in functions. It allows you to segment your code, parse your code out, and make it a lot more manageable and readable. So what you'll see now when you look at my file here, if I go look at the rule, you'll see that Tinderbox is now calling the function short title, and it's now also calling the function create note and link with prefix, which I'm going to explain in just a minute. And then I'm passing it variables, and then it's doing its thing and it's parsing it back out. So that's what the new hints folder is for. And it really adds this incredibly robust layer of capability in Tinderbox that's now available in Tinderbox 9. Does that make sense, Paul? Okay. And again, we can go back in a great more detail on that. So let's go now through my process here, and as we talk about it. So invariably, when you're doing this kind of writing, you're going to want to be collecting your notes. And you'll see I've been writing a lot in these examples. Now, the key behind this file, one of the things that I like to do in my writing is I like to let me give you an example. Let's go down here. So let's look at these two notes that we've pulled into the file as part of this curation process. So we've pulled these two notes in. They're great. That's pretty interesting. And now what we want to do is be able to tag these notes so we can, like, for example, run agents to rediscover them later, or to be able to pull them with action code into another part of your file, or be able to insert elements of their text into that other file. It's really the power of Tinderbox as you move down the process of the 5 Cs of knowledge management. And so you'll see here, I've created a user-generated attribute called term. For whatever reason, I don't like the word tags. I don't use keywords. I use the word term. They're equivalently the same thing. Tags, keywords, terms, whatever you want it to be. I've used the term for my files. Now, the reason why I'm doing that, and let me show you some of the areas here. So if I go and look at these notes, for example, on this particular note, I was writing about this idea of the 4 categories of personal information management. And as I'm writing, what I want to be able to do is create discrete sets of knowledge and assets that I can re-leverage in the future for when I want to do more work. And so when I'm writing, I'll think, okay, I got an idea. Well, what are the 4 categories of personal information management? It's attitudinal data, attribute data, behavioral data, and behavior data. So I'm coming up with the terms. You'll also see it's record data is another one, capital data. And when I was doing my demo, I hadn't added that. So I'm going to go ahead and add in the word capital data. I'm going to add in the word record data. Now, what you're going to see happening right here is, let me make sure I've got my camera in the way. So you'll see right, so I'm going to click away. Now, Tinderbox will have dutifully updated, and you'll notice that it's now automatically linked this note to the terms capital data and attribute data. And if I look at some of these, if I look at attitudinal data, Tinderbox will pop this up. I can pull this out. I can now look at that attribute. So what this does for me in my writing is it allows me to stay focused with where I'm writing and where I'm creating my, where I'm curating knowledge and creating knowledge without like bouncing around and navigating all over the place. So let's start that for a new note. So let's say I'm doing a note, and this is on child behavior. And it's because I just, for whatever reason, I love picking on Bruce. That's why I'm coming up with this one. So I'm saying on child behavior. So I'm going to start writing some text. I'm going to start, capturing some knowledge, collecting some knowledge. In this case, creation, because I'm starting from my own insights and thoughts, which is going to lead to the collection and curation process. So Bruce, can you do me a favor? What are some terms that are important when it comes to child behavior?
Internalizing characteristics, externalizing characteristics.
Hang on. Internalizing. Let me get the spelling right.
There's not enough coffee in the world right now.
Characteristics. Okay, and then what's another one? Externalizing?
Externalizing. Cody, he'll be gone in a second.
Okay, and do you have like a third?
Sure. Asocial.
Asocial. Like spelled like one word, 2 words, asocial.
One word, asocial.
Right, like that?
Yep.
Okay. So you see, so I've created.
And we'll say asocial characteristics.
Okay. Okay. So you'll see that I've created this note called on child behavior, and I'm going to start writing some content and text around that. And and again, this is like that magic trick, nothing up my sleeves. These terms I'd never heard of before in my life until Bruce just said them right now. And there's knowledge around that. So I could easily just, add these as tags into a document. But personally, for me, that doesn't really help my education and my learning, because I don't know what these terms, excuse me. Okay. I don't know what these terms mean, and I haven't defined them. And without adding another layer of data or information to them, I'm never going to actually be able to practically use them or learn them. So watch what happens here. So the second I click away, those notes, those attributes are those values are put into the term user attribute term. But now look, Tinderbox has automatically created linked to these new notes, asocial characteristics, externalizing characteristics, internalizing characteristics. And what it has done, if I actually go down now into my resources folder down here, you'll see that it's actually created notes about these terms, right? So now when I'm doing my writing and I'm in this mode of on child behavior, I can go ahead, for example, here, quickly define asocial behavior. Asocial behavior is what?
Lessened interest in other individuals, more interested in objects and activities.
Okay, so I quickly populated that note. How about externalizing characteristics?
Easily observable behaviors such as impulsivity and oppositionality. Yeah, I'm just doing this to make it hard for you to spell.
And blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. And internalizing characteristics.
Difficult to see behaviors such as anxiety, or sadness.
Okay. So, we've basically quickly captured some knowledge about that. Now, the great thing about this, we've been, and I can say, let's say we're talking about more about this, and I'm doing an intro piece of text on child behavior. By the way, when I have an application called Text Expander. So when I have a tag that says, when I do a / and I type a word like lorem, it will drop in lorem ipsum code for me. So Text Expander is a great, companion application to the overall Tinderbox experience. So think about what I've done here then. So as I'm doing my writing, I've been able to start defining this concept of child behavior, start associating it with these other concepts and notes. And if I go look now, you'll see I've actually defined that term antisocial behavior. Now, one of the things that we've learned is that what would be a category? Antisocial behavior, internalizing characteristics, externalizing characteristics. Now, do these notes have, can we roll these up to a higher level categorical concept?
We could call it student characteristics. We could call it personality traits.
All right, there you go, personality traits. All right. So let's say we've now, the concept of asocial characteristics, notice I'm in the note asocial characteristics, and I'm now going to give it the category personality traits. And look what happens. Just like when we created the notes, Tinderbox has now created a new note called personality traits, which we now can define. Right. So if you can see where I'm going now, what I'm trying to do is creating a scaffolding of knowledge creation where I can go from my basic note to creating terms to creating categories. And now with personality traits, would those roll up to a theme, Bruce?
I'm sorry?
Like behavioral science, I guess, is personality traits part of a broader theme?
Elements of child social functioning.
Okay. Okay, so you'll see now Tinderbox has now created a theme for me. And this is all going to make sense in just a second. So I've now got elements of child social functioning, which I now can define. Okay, now what's interesting about this is, let's say I've got this category called personality traits that we've created. Now I'm going to go back to my child behavior. And let's say, oh yeah, by the way, you know what? This note, externalized characteristics, is also related to the category of personality traits, and internalizing characteristics is also related to the category of personality traits. So again, what Tinderbox allows you to do is, depending on how you're using it, wherever you can access a note, you can edit its text or any of its other attributes, which is really, really valuable. Now, I don't know if you noticed in the background, if we're now looking at my child behavior, remember, right? Nothing up my sleeves. Tinderbox automatically associated this note on child behavior with the categories of personality traits and the theme, elements of child functioning. So what I'm doing is, as I'm creating my terms, taxonomy or folksonomy, if you will, and my themes, I'm having action code that's running up and down the stream that are capturing notes. And you'll also see here too, and I'll get to that in a minute. So think about this then later when you're wanting to run indexes, or when you're wanting to run agents, or you're wanting to run and pull elements of this particular note into other parts of your file. You can have Tinderbox automating all of this kind of tagging and methods for you. Now, you can use the natural language taggers that Mark has given us for similar purposes, but when you're wanting to manually curate this method, this is what's allowing you to be able to do this. So let me pause there. I'm going to show you the action code and the functionality of how this works in just a second. but I wanted to get a sense too of, or your reaction of this type of, content curation. What's your reaction to that? Is it making sense?
We've
Value
talked
in it?
about it, but we've talked about it before, but I think it's great. Obviously one can adjust the levels of hierarchy of embeddedness, categorization, but it's terrific and really useful. Quick question related to this. You
Mhm.
see right there, move right where your cursor is now. What are those? What is that line? Asocial, attitudinal. What is that indicating?
Where?
Right, literally where your cursor is.
I think my
Oh,
cursor.
no, sorry, it's my cursor. To the right, the upper column.
here?
No. Up
Here?
at the top, on child behavior, go back up, now to
Yeah.
the right. No. What are those terms? Those are associated no, go to the left. It's displaying us right
Oh,
there.
yeah, this is just the, this
Oh,
is.
it's just displaying associated terms.
I just have,
Okay.
I just have the in Tinderbox, you can have the, and I'll show you, it's actually an interesting idea. You can have column view showing,
Gotcha, yeah,
right? And so I just happen to have the column showing because I was doing some testing.
gotcha.
But I'll show you why that has value in just a minute if we have time.
Yeah, no, I thought those were.
But for the sake of lack of confusion, you can see I can remove that and it's not a big deal.
Just a quick note, I have to step out in a few minutes, so I
No worries.
apologize.
No worries. Okay, so
Michael, I have a question before you go on, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What I really liked about this, I mean, this is something I've been writing about. This was a small piece. And so I can immediately see where then I can pull in my articles and other information, and it's organized into little pods of information, if you will.
Yes, that's exactly
Yeah.
it. Now, let me show you. Go ahead, Bruce.
Go ahead. And it just strikes me that the way I've been doing that, using a combination of Google Docs and some other tools, doesn't quite get there in this way. This adds another level of dimensionality.
Yeah, and again, this is it trying to drive my wife nuts. I've got this concept in my life where I hate going back. If she's going to send me on errands, I'm going to take the extra 20 or 30 minutes that's needed so I can just do all of the errands in one loop. And if I go to Home Depot, forget something, and then have to go back to Home Depot, drives me crazy, right? So the same kind of mental proclivity that I have here, if that's a word, is what's driving me to do this. I only want to do something once. And once I've done it, if I can then reuse it, I want to be able to reuse it. I want to be able to repurpose it. I want to be able to refactor it. I don't want to go back. Go ahead.
One question on this, because I mean, I think I've been transparent that I'm a low-level user. I use it for notes. I pull things together and nest them. I don't have action code skills. I don't have some of these other skills. And so, and it doesn't have to be for right now, but one of the things that I wonder about, I'm comfortable with everything I see that you read. I mean, the parsing to get off the dash, the HTML, that's all, the CSS, that's all fine. Can't yet create it myself. And so a pathway to get me from where I am to some element of this, that'll be an important lesson for me.
Well, and again, that pathway is what I talked about in the beginning of this class, this session, is I intend to in July, once I get two of the books that I'm writing and my some traveling out of the way, I intend to run a 6-week course to teach people how to do this line by line by line, slowly, incrementally doing it. That envision of what we had 2.5 years ago, Bruce, when we first started this process. I'm now actually there myself where I can actually teach this line by line by line. Likewise, I think we've debugged this file enough that 95% of people can just take it and use it as is. And then can incrementally deconstruct it at their will. But let me show you one other element that I think this is really useful.
Can I just quickly respond to Bruce before Bruce? I think one of the biggest problems in information management is platform creep. So you've got stuff in Google Docs, you've got stuff in DevonThink, and one of the biggest problems that I have is just literally pulling this together. And what I think what Michael's done here, not having used this as systematically, is you've got one brain essentially, or one central place where instead of like looking in multiple platforms, it's centralized, and that alone can save you enormous amounts of time and effort.
Yes, and there are other
Agreed.
tools too that will help you with that. And then, but here's one other thing too. It's funny. I had never really heard of Tiago Forte until like 3 days ago, and I've now heard of him at least 3 or 4 times from different sources in the last 4 days. And so kind of possibly brother from another mother. I mean, we're definitely in the same zeitgeist of trying to do this knowledge management thing. And one of the articles I read about him yesterday was, this really totally rang true for me. For your own personal, and I'm completely riffing and paraphrasing off what I've interpreted from what he read or what he wrote. For your own purpose, notices use your centralized tool. But when you start collaborating with others, don't look for that universal tool that solves everyone's problems. It's okay. And this is why I like Tinderbox. And so let me use this as an example right now, and then we'll move on. This is a little side note example of a program. So for example, I am actively working with a conference in London where I'm going to be, let me find the speakers pool here and I'll pull this up. Yeah, I need this one. I need to go outline view. Come on. Outline, come on. Let me see. There we go. Outline view. And I'm going to go here. There's my speakers pool. Okay, great. So I'm actively working with a conference where I am, and again, this just shows you the universality of the process that I'm showing you. So I'm working on a conference in London, and we're going to have about 50 speakers and 24 different sessions. And to be able to manage those speakers, what I'm doing is I'm creating notes about the speakers. Who are they? What are they? Just like I've been showing you now, they're linking to different names and entities and the sessions that I want them speaking on. Like you'll see, I'm speaking on a number of different sessions at this conference, well, because I'm organizing it, and all of these different things. Now, using action code, I'm able to pull in their image, their headshot image. I'm able to pull in their different entities they're associated with, their name, their titles, etc. And here's a great example of what's happening here now in the program. So this group I'm working with, they have this this spreadsheet that they use for managing their events. And so this is their spreadsheet for managing the events, and it's really functional for the way they manage their process. But for me to be able to manage the 100+ speakers that I'm talking to for this event, it becomes really unwieldy. And when I first started doing this, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to have to give up my Tinderbox process and use their tool. And then I said, no, wait a minute. What I need to do is do what I'm doing. Then you see here, I've added in the columns that Lou was referring to earlier. Now watch this. Let's say I want to now go and say, I'm now, as part of the team I'm working with, I'm going to say I want Andrew Budd talking at this part of the event. This is where they're saying in their spreadsheet who's going to be speaking in a particular session. I can go ahead here. If I hit Command C, I'm now copying this line out of Tinderbox, and I can go into the Google spreadsheet and hit paste. And so now I've essentially effectively taking my content out of Tinderbox and pasted it into this other tool. And so what Tiago is essentially saying, what's really important is it's okay to duplicate content across different platforms as long as you have your own centralized personal tool, right? And then that will allow you to be efficient and effective as you're updating other things. But don't waste all of this time trying to have the one perfect tool that works everywhere. Find the tool that lets you the most optimal with the way you manage your knowledge, and then use that to copy and paste and redistribute your information as you need to. So I found that to be a really powerful insight for me. Okay, so let's go back here. The next thing I want to be able to show you here is, let's say I'm writing this, and as part of this article now, I want to be able to actually define these terms. Now watch this. This is really cool. If I go here, I'm going to now copy these terms out of my terms folder here, and I'm then going to go ahead and just create some line breaks here. Okay, now and you'll notice I've spelled this wrong, so let's go ahead and fix this spelling. Now watch what happens here, which is going to be really interesting. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to fix the spelling on these notes. And then I'm going to go down here and fix the spelling on these notes. Okay, now occasionally you will get some duplicates, which is fine because you can now just remove them if you didn't catch them fast enough. And so now you see that I was able to quickly fix the spelling of the notes that were in my term folder. Yes, Tinderbox automatically created the ones with the recreated the one with the misspelling, but I was able to fix that very quickly. And again, you can watch this video later. Now, let me show you this. Another really interesting element of Tinderbox is this capability called export code. Now, what export code allows you to do is export your content out of Tinderbox, but it also allows you to leverage the presentation elements internally within Tinderbox to pull content into your notes. So watch what I'm going to do here. Again, using that tool text expander. And why don't I just open up text expander to show that to you real quick. So here's the text expander tool. And you'll notice here, I've got a quick snippet I call include. And when I type the word anywhere in my Mac, if I type the word /include, Tinderbox will take the information that I have on my clipboard, pull in Tinderbox export code, and then insert a term in the clipboard, and then apply the export code formatting that I want. Again, in the future, we can, when I do that class in July, we will specifically line by line go through every one of these details. But now watch what happens. I'm going to copy the term in. Now I'm going to enter the term include. And you'll see what happened. Tinderbox automatically went ahead and inserted the word antisocial, wrapped it around markdown text, and then used the export code, include the name of the note and the template that I want to be applied when that note's going to be included. So let's do the same thing here. And we'll do the same thing here. Okay, so you see, so I'm kind of incrementally developing my content along the way, and I'm also going to apply my markdown template here. I can explain that later. And now watch when I preview this text. Tinderbox has automatically bulleted those terms that we've now created and inserted the definitions that we defined for that text. So this allows you to really start refining and developing your articles. And when you're in that initial kind of creation, thought leadership, thought process stage, this is really helpful because for me, this is like the idea of going back to Home Depot 10 times when you're doing a project. I've created the term once. As you noticed, I found some spelling errors. I was able to quickly fix those spelling errors. If I'm now reviewing my content, like I don't like this XXX. I want to actually go back and fix it. I can stay in situ of where my work is going on. I can pull that particular note up. And what did you say, Bruce? Easily observable behavior, set impulsivity, and what?
Just say oppositional behavior. I said oppositionality. OPPOSITION. Yeah. Sure, go with that.
Okay. Right. So you see, I fixed that text. Click here. Go back here, automatically fixed, right? Because Tinderbox is pulling from the source, the central source of that term, oppositional behavior. And so so this is the beauty of like this process. So when I'm doing this particular note, think about this. I am now creating a glossary of terms that I can now reuse anywhere. And in multiple ways and in different, and I can refactor them and use them in different places. And so this process, as I just showed you, for managing a trade show event, doing industry strategic research, writing an article, publishing a book, it really works for anything. It's just the context on how you're doing it. So that's kind of where another method here. And so, and again, so with me so far? Okay, now let me show you the next part. Here's an example of a compiled article. So you'll see here, I've got a note, and now I'm going to nest notes underneath a note. Same process works, education, privacy, party and test, just terms that I was throwing in here. Same process. Now watch this. Because I've applied a template, and I'll show you the template in just a minute, T article page to this note versus this note, which is having the HTML page templates. look what happens. So when I review this child behavior one, which is using the, and this one is using a different template. This one is using my Markdown template. So when I preview it in Markdown, you'll see that I'm getting that kind of rendering. When I'm previewing it, this one, because this other template, this one called T article has stylized HTML, you can actually see I can actually get a completely different output for my article. And when I look at it, the expert, you can actually see that I can actually embed within my template metadata description that would be used, for instance, for the internet, for this article to be able to properly be discovered and searched by search engines and all of that. So there's a lot of really interesting nuances that you can do in leveraging Tinderbox. So what we shared with you though thus far is you can create notes, you can create attributes and terminology to notes, and then you can go ahead and start rendering and repurposing your content. So what I'm going to show you in the last few minutes is the behind the scenes and how all of this works. And the really core elements to this entire process are essentially this is the whole kind of holy grail function that you're seeing here. And so what you'll see here in my action code, and let me just kind of walk you through this, is what this action code is saying is, and let me look at the note. So for example, I have a note here, and if I look at the rule of this note, you'll see here I'm saying, hey, Tinderbox, create the short title like we talked about before. Now I'm saying, hey, Tinderbox, go call the function create and link note with prefix. And then you'll see this set of information here. What this information here is, it's passing variables to the function. So I'm telling Tinderbox, pass the term, pass the path, the container, the folder to which I want those term notes to be added, pass the prefix that I want you to give to that note, pass the link type I want you to give to that note, and pass the direction that I want that note either to or from to happen. And now, if we then look here on the terminology, you'll see what Tinderbox is doing is it's saying, okay, function, here's the input. So this input element here is saying, from that particular note, pull the inputs that the note is passing to me. And then what this set of elements doing is it's saying, create a dictionary that Tinderbox can parse from all of those elements. So the CONT element becomes the container. The pref element becomes the prefix. The LITY element becomes the link type. The ATTY element becomes the attribute that I'm going to use. And then I'm running action code. I'm saying, hey, Tinderbox, go evaluate the attribute variable. And for each one in the list within that dictionary, go to and create basically add the prefix to the name of the note, and then go create that note if it doesn't already exist. And again, in a future lesson, we'll go line by line through all this, but I just want you to see what's happening. And then the next function that's being called is the next one, let's go through this one. The next function that's being called is, all right, evaluate the attribute this time, and then look at the notes and the containers of the notes, and then actually link that note you just created, or the note that's the value that's in that attribute term, to this note that I'm currently having in focus, this particular note. And so again, it took me forever to figure this out. So you'll be able to just copy and paste and use this text, Bruce, as without even knowing how it works. But over time, you're going to get more familiarity with this, with what's happening here. So let's review what we just said. This is saying, hey, Tinderbox, grab values from instructions from that note. Create that note create a new note based on those values. Tinderbox is smart enough to know that if a note already exists in a particular place with the same name, it won't recreate it twice. Then link to that note. And so this one function is producing all of this functionality that you just saw that we had here, in terms of this linking to the notes and letting me do everything that we were just talking about. Now, the next piece that I wanted to show you that's really important in this file is what's called templates. So another really powerful capability that I've not really seen any other tool have is this idea of templates. And so I showed you before when I ran the article, for example, blah, 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 Tinderbox apply this style sheet, and then, render the article in a way. So you're showing the title of the text, show the text, and then process its children. Similarly, you'll look at this this template I've created here. Hey, Tinderbox, go grab the current note you're on, create a table, have the first column of the table be named with the term type, and I'll show this to you in just a second. Then it's description, citations, index count, and an index, and then process each of the children of that note and pull that information into a table. So essentially create the row of the table, add the table item, put in the short title. This is where short title matters. Include the description of that particular note, add its citation key, add its number count, add its index. Okay, so let me show you now what happens here. So you see, we've been all along the way, we've been creating all of this terminology in these notes, right? And we've been creating categories and we've been creating themes. Now watch what happens when I go render and preview this particular file. And again, just as you can see the magic, I'm telling Tinderbox, when you preview this file terms folder, apply the note T resources table, which is essentially this template, which is essentially telling Tinderbox, pull all of the values from the attributes of this particular note and generate me a table. Okay, let me pause there. Does that make sense? I know you can't do it, but I'm just trying to tell you, so you can see the potential of it. You'll be able to do it yourself once we teach you how to do it. So now watch what happens. When I go and render that file, Tinderbox has gone through, pulled all of the terms, listed the terms, provided the descriptions, put in these citations if there's citations in that value. If you're using Pandoc, Pandoc will automatically re-render those citations into API MSLL Chicago styled citations. And it also, I have another set of action code that's creating an index. Now watch what this index does. So you'll see, like, for example, the note authentication is indexed. It's being used in the note on authentication. It's being used in the note term multi-factor authentication. If we go down to the externalizing characteristics, it's being used on the note on child behavior. Internalized characteristics is being used on the note on child behavior. Now watch this. If I click on that, it will actually take me to the note. So now I actually have an interactive glossary of terms in my Tinderbox file. Moreover, it shows me an account how many different notes within my file that term is used. So again, you kind of incrementally driving this note. And then if I'm publishing a book or if I'm publishing an article, this is something that would go into an HTML page. This is something that would go into a Microsoft Word document. And later we can show you Pandoc and all of that. But if I just copy this text right now and pull up Microsoft Word and I create a new Word document, there's my glossary of terms in Microsoft Word, now published out of Tinderbox. Right. So really, really, really powerful if you think about the way you do it. Now, remember, if I can look at categories, now look here, this says term, this now says category, this now says theme. Remember, I talked about this earlier. I'm not saying if I just change this to blah, 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 and I go up here and I render it, it now says blah, blah, blah everywhere. Right? If I go and undo that change that I just made, oops. Okay, I'll just go do my text expander name, right? If I and I type in, so what I'm telling Tinderbox is pull the type value from the note and insert that in here. So if you see here in each one of these, the type is acronyms, the type is theme, the type is category. And so when it renders, it's pulling that and inserting that value in the first column of the note. So again, Tinderbox's templating tools let you be able to really granularly control these types of elements. Now, the last thing I want to show you is we're not limited to just doing this with the concept of term. Let's say now, as you're doing your notes and as you're doing your elements, you know what? I actually want to also be able to start capturing things like contacts, people, right? So I'm going to add a new, where's contact? I didn't want container, sorry. I'm going to add a new attribute to my to my notes file. And you'll see here, I've got now a contact attribute. You guys see that? Okay, so let's say I'm talking to, I'm going to, and it could be a whole number of reasons why you want to do this. But let's say I'm going to type Paul Christie. And so I will now want the person, Paul Christie, associated with this note. Okay, makes sense? You got me? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the notes folder. And remember, we've got a generic set of action code I've created for passing and creating term notes. So I'm going to take the rule of the notes folder, hit enter, hit paste. And now I'm just going to change the variables that I'm passing. I want you to, for every value that's in contact now, go and drop that into a folder called people. And I don't actually want, for people, I don't actually want a prefix. And I want you to link them with the word contacts. And I want the directionality to be 2. So if I hit enter, you'll see that Tinderbox has automatically created a folder called people. And it's now created an element called Paul Christie. I can go up here and I can change the on add to person, make Paul a person. And you now see I've got this person called Paul Christie. So now if I go back up here and I can go ahead and change this type to person. Okay. And if I go up to Paul, this new note on child behavior, and I'm now going to also add Tom Diaz to this note. Click away. Tinderbox is now going to create a person called Tom Diaz. It's because I did the on add, it's linked Tom to that. It's linked Tom to the note. Likewise, because I'm using the same templates, I need to apply the right template. Resource tables, right? Okay, what I didn't do for people is I now need to go and add, which I haven't done, where's my indexing code? Oh, here, term. I've got indexing code. So if I grab my indexing code and add that to my person code, I can say cross-reference with any link that is contact, hit enter. And you'll now see that that is being interacted. Now, the other thing that I have wrong here is the reason why this is not getting populated is, remember, I don't have a prefix for my people notes and my people, but all my tables are using the value short title, not name. So I'm going to say short title equals name. So here I'm telling Tinderbox, hey, Tinderbox, make the attribute of people the name of the note. Okay, so I'm going to now add that. Now, if I go back up here, you'll now see automatically Paul Christie citations used in one note. And so you can just see how Tinderbox the flexibility of Tinderbox is just crazy. And so I can say, Tom is a AI, is a doctor with specialty in AI systems. Right. And now if I go up and look at my folder now too, I can now see Tom Diaz. Tom is a doctor with specialty in AI systems. Right. So now you can see that you can do this not just with term notes. You can do this with any attribute you want. People, entities, companies, products, services, features, functions, and like for my product analysis, in my industry work, I don't use terms, categories, themes. I use features, functions, right? I capabilities. So I roll up from features to capabilities, so I can start rolling that up. And again, you now can then see how all of these different elements are working out. And if you look at my article here too, you'll then see I've added other metadata for the file. So when I'm looking at, I'm in this article, I'm saying, hey, Tinderbox, go collect all the terms, categories, and themes used by the children of this note for this particular article. So Tinderbox dutifully goes out and grabs all of the terms, categories, themes in the note. Then I can spend a few seconds and say, well, what's the meta description I want to write about this article? What are the fundamental keywords I want to pull out of the articles that I've used for this article, and who's the author? So when I go publish this article, the metadata for this article on the internet is going to be properly, dutifully populated. So essentially what I'm doing is this information is now allowing me to synthesize tighter and tighter the metadata that I'm going to use for my article. So unfortunately, we ran about 5 minutes late over, but I think we've covered at a high level most of what this process is doing and its generalized capabilities and the extensibility of it for really to be applied to literally any knowledge management exercise or effort. And all you really need to do is just a handful of lines of code. It's not that much. So let me pause there and we can kind of wrap it up for now. What do you guys think? Do you find this interesting, inspiring, useful, helpful? Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, so, quick talk or thought on how you come up with this. So is this development process iterative for you, or do you start with some kind of information map of here's what I want, here's how I need to pull it together, here's what I need to do to make it happen?
Yeah, it's totally iterative, and it's driven by, I've got a problem. What do I need to solve? Right. And what I've learned to trust is, it's really the metification of all of my data and all of my insights. So I really tried to and so think of some of the key themes here. I'm really trying to parse everything down to its atomic level. The text of this note is the note. Who Tom Diaz is here, his address, his name, it's all broken out. And the more you can break out your content, the more you can reassemble that content on the other end. So if we go back to the beginning of our discussion here, when I was talking about the 5 C's of knowledge management process, what that's doing, close this out. So if we look at the 5 C's of management process, when you're collecting the note, the curation process is really critical. And what a lot of people don't realize when they're producing value, they think the value that they give to the world is actually in the contribution, the output. Here's the report I've done for you. That's not the value. That's the byproduct of your value. Your value is actually created here. It's in all of this curation and taking those extra few minutes to add that citation, to add that key. So for example, what I would do, for instance, this article on the second brain, and I'll just finish this up for you. So, you guys know that I use Zotero as my citation management tool. So what I would have done when I originally done this, I wouldn't have just dragged in that article or that URL. I would have actually looked at this. I would have clicked the Zotero button here that would then automatically add that article to my Zotero button. I would then go ahead and quickly populate the fields if it wasn't already added. Right. So I'm quick, and so the rest of the data is here. My Zotero is giving me a citation key now for that article. I'm now going to pop back to my Tinderbox file, and I'm actually going to say, here's the citation key for this article. And I'm now going to add the citation into the article there. Right. So now if I then go render that article using my Pandoc tool, okay, and I've got to make sure that I've got to, sometimes I do it faster than the software can actually keep up. So I can then force a library export just to make sure that works. And there's my library export. Come on. Okay. So now when we render, did I not do it right? Just a minute. Come on. Oh, it's still exporting the items. Got it. Let's let it finish the export. Okay. Well, so we don't have to wait for it. I'll just show you. Let's say I grabbed an article like Becker 2022. Right? Hit render. It automatically cites my work and gives me the reference. Right? And then if I go here and I change the citation methodology I want it to use, Instead of APA, I wanted to use Chicago 1, and here's the site reference. Right. So the key with this kind of methodology is you want to get everything as possible into its discretest, minutest little element so that you then can repurpose it and re-render it in any way you want. So for example, let me show you this last list element here. When I'm looking at an individual term, attitude description, right? But when I'm looking at it in the table folder, I want the first letter to be lowercase because it wouldn't make sense for, you know, this uppercase lesson to be up. It wouldn't make sense for this to be uppercased here in the way the language is being written. So if you look here, this is one of the powers of Tinderbox. I can go here and you'll see I'm actually telling Tinderbox, hey, when you're rendering it in a table, make the first character of the text lowercase. And then when you're done, revert it back to uppercase so that I can later reuse it. Now, Bruce, to your comment earlier, I wouldn't know how to write that. Well, guess what? I didn't either 3 days ago. I post something on the forum. Hey guys, how do I make the first character of a particular piece of text lowercase? The forum came back with and said, do it this way. I'm like, great. Dropped in the code, didn't really know how it worked, and it worked. And then after a day or two, I figured it out and I know how it worked. So that's the power of this community and what we're doing. And that's the idea then, this concept of you're being able to repurpose your content in any kind of different way, as long as you've got it as autonomized as possible. You know, another example of that, and then I'm going to let you guys go, is if you look here, I've got a whole bunch of terms that I'm using in the article, and you see these terms, my metadata keywords have semicolons in them, right? Well, when you're rendering this kind of metadata for a website, you don't want semicolons, you want commas separating your keywords. Well, how do you do that? If we go down to the template here, you'll see that I'm telling Tinderbox, grab the metadata keywords item and then replace the commas, the semicolons with a comma. And so when this file then renders, those semicolons are replaced with a comma. If I remove that, replace, right? And I now go look at the article, you'll see semicolon, right? So the power of Tinderbox is it allows you to transform any of your content, any of your text, tag it, manage it, interact with it, create new notes, create new insights, move up and down the chain, and publish the material. And so I'm hoping what this session did today is it kind of helped you see potential. It helped you see new ways of doing things. It helped you see the whole end-to-end process. And it started to give you some sense of how these different pieces work. All right.
It's just, I was going to mention to you, one of the ways that I go through these sessions that Michael does. I mean, there's a lot of information in here, but what I try to do is I try to take a piece of it and I try to recreate it in a brand new Tinderbox file to learn the code. And that's the way I've kind of gotten started. And I just use a portion of it, like linking. How do you do linking? And if you can write it out yourself, you've got it. And you understand. I first start out, well, what's a process? How does he link? What does he use? Does he use prototypes? Does he use functions? What's a function? And I start building that out myself, and then I check it with his code. Well,
So
why did he do it that way?
Here's an example. Like, here's a blank Tinderbox file, right? Yeah. What do you need, Bruce?
Well, no, my calls are going to start coming in. I'm going to have.
Yeah, no worries. We're done. But to Tom's point, my point was the point that Tom's making is really critical. Let's say I wanted to grab this code. I can just grab this code, drop in the hints folder into a brand new Tinderbox file, go to outline, drop that file into the library. So there's our library. I can then grab one of the like the P notes file, drop that into prototypes, and then I can go ahead and create a new note and say P note. So let's say note, give that note the P note prototype, right? And then Tinderbox wants you to create the items that didn't exist before. So we're going to go ahead here and create those real quick. Set. All right. So now I can go ahead and drop a term here. We'll go call it, I don't know, privacy. And okay, and then the one thing it didn't do is, okay, it should have worked. Why didn't it work? Okay. And then you'll be able to, have it automatically generate the notes. I'd have to double check why it didn't work, but that's the idea. And you should be able to quickly just move and paste and copy your these capabilities over into, the reason why it didn't work is, the reason why I didn't do it is the short title is missing. So I need to copy the short title over to
Michael, I just want to comment. I love Tom's point about that. And that's what I'm trying to get to the point of doing, Tom, is where, I see what I'm going to call a magic trick. And I take one element of it and try and see if I can recreate that element of the magic trick on my own.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to do. You can, and again, that's the beauty of Tinderbox, is you can parse and paste some of these elements over into the files and make it work. And the reason why it's not, and there you go.
And Paul, one of the things that I quickly found out in terms of being able to go bottom up or top down in terms of understanding a whatever I have in there. But the other point that I was missing that Michael's system really helped me understand is a lot of times I would have people that you were either mentioned, associated with an idea or note, and I could never find them unless I did an agent. But if somebody said, well, give me a person and give me all the notes that are associated with him, that's really a different view than I ever had before. It was all related to knowledge and themes and stuff, but now you have people and it's almost like another dimension. And so by linking these notes together, I started seeing my data associated with people. And then you can draw organizations into it, like which organizations are, related to these ideas. Then you go into products and it starts making you think in a very, very different way, and allowing you to map it out, that I think is pretty powerful. But I took it one step at a time. Okay, people, I want to start understanding the people associated with all of these ideas that I have or notes that I have in my Tinderbox. And I started there, and then I started building slowly just so I could understand it and grab it. But it's pretty powerful, Michael. You've done you've evolved over 2 years, and this is a lot of work.
So if you look here too, to your point, Tom, all I did was copy over the linking note function, the short title function, and you see it immediately started the whole process. And
what I heard was, and all I do is extend my arms and I can levitate 4 feet off the ground.
Right. But again, you can do this. I can do it. You can do it. Yeah. And to Tom's point, you can deconstruct these pieces and do each one individually as they anchor themselves up. And then you ask me or the community, and we help you out as you learn this process. But you only need to use the pieces that work or are beneficial for you at this moment. It's like the yoga teacher that says, look, you don't need to touch your toes when you're doing yoga. At that moment, if all you can do is touch your knees, perfect. You're in the place where you need to be. So this is like, call it Tinderbox yoga.
Thank you.
Yeah. But hey, well, unfortunately, I'm sorry for taking you guys a little longer, and I know you got calls, everybody, but I'm hopeful that you found this session beneficial and insightful.
It's great. Thank you, Michael.
it's very heuristic. It truly is. I found
Definitely.
myself popping away and making notes and drafts about a talk I'm giving in 2 weeks based on things you were saying.
Awesome. Fantastic. And then later we can talk about how you get your draft notes into Tinderbox, or from the notes from drafts into Brain, or pull all these pieces together. Those are all other elements that we can discuss. But again, I find it just, this whole thing just super exciting and really, really transformational for my, let's put it this way. I wouldn't have my job today if it weren't for everything that I was doing here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Michael, I'll
Have a
clean
great
up these
day,
notes
everyone.
and shoot them to you.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Paul, what was the question? Was that a question or a statement?
No statement. I'll clean up these notes and send them to you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Al.